Your alleged daughter has filed a petition requesting DNA testing to establish paternity. The legal letter read, and I felt my world crumble. 26 years of being Scarlett's father, bedtime stories, scraped knees, proud graduations, and now she was questioning if I was even her biological parent. I was expecting some explanation, maybe a misunderstanding, but when I hired a private investigator, what I discovered was far worse than I imagined. My ex-wife wasn't just having an affair, she was living off stolen money. The man she'd chosen over me had embezzled millions from elderly victims, and my daughter was his perfect cover story. They thought the blue-collar electrician would just disappear quietly, except being erased from his own child's life. They were wrong. What I did next would expose their lies, destroy their perfect facade, and prove that some fathers refuse to stay buried. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I'd been up since 6:30, same as every workday for the past 30 years. Shower coffee, check the weather for the job site. My hands still bore yesterday's electrical work, honest calluses that told the story of a man who'd built his life, wire by wire, circuit by circuit. The kitchen was small, but clean, everything in its place. A photo of Scarlett at her college graduation still held the place of honor on the refrigerator, even though she barely called anymore. The envelope felt heavy in my hands. Palmer. Grady. Urgent legal matter was typed across the front in bold letters. My first thought was a mistake, maybe something about a job site, insurance, or taxes. But when I tore it open and read the first line, my world tilted off its axis. Mr. Grady, this is to inform you that your alleged daughter, Scarlett Whitmore, formerly Scarlett Grady, has filed a petition requesting DNA testing to establish paternity. Alleged daughter. The words hit like a punch to the gut. I read it again, then a third time, my hands shaking slightly. Scarlett had legally changed her name to Whitmore. When had that happened? And why was she questioning paternity now? After 26 years, I sank into my kitchen chair, the letter trembling in my grip. 26 years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, piano recitals, and driving lessons. 26 years of being the dad who showed up, who stayed, who loved unconditionally, even when her mother made it clear I wasn't sophisticated enough for their new life. Now my own daughter was claiming I might not even be her biological father. The memories flooded back, unbidden, teaching her to ride that pink bicycle when she was 6, running alongside until she found her balance. Her gap-toothed grin when she finally pedaled solo, shouting, "Look, Daddy, I'm flying!" The night she called crying after her first heartbreak, and I drove 3 hours through a snowstorm just to sit with her until sunrise. Her high school graduation speech, where she pointed directly at me and said, "This is from my dad who taught me that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard." Those moments were real. The love was real. The bond we'd shared for over 2 decades was real. So why was she doing this now? My phone buzzed. Cordelia, my business partner, and the closest thing I had to family these days. She always called around 8 to discuss the day's schedule. "Morning, Palmer. You sound off. Everything okay?" I stared at the letter trying to find words. "Cordelia, I just got something in the mail. Scarlett's. She's filed for a paternity test. It says I'm her alleged father." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, she spoke, her voice tight with disbelief. "Palmer, that girl loves you. Something's not right here. That kind of legal action doesn't come from nowhere. 4 years since the divorce, and I've been the perfect gentleman," I said, surprising myself with the edge in my voice. Stayed quiet when Vivian painted me as the obstacle to Scarlett's bright future. Accepted the reduced visitation. Never fought dirty even when they moved to that fancy neighborhood and started acting like I was an embarrassment. And now, I looked at the letter again, at the cold legal language trying to erase 26 years of fatherhood. Something had shifted inside me, something that had been dormant too long. Maybe it's time to stop being so perfect. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen as the morning light grew stronger, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. The letter lay before me like a gauntlet thrown down, challenging not just my paternity, but everything I'd believed about my relationship with my daughter. Whatever was behind this, whoever was behind this, they just made a critical mistake. They'd awakened something in Palmer Grady that had been sleeping too long. The nice guy who'd stepped aside for everyone else's comfort was about to step back into the rain. I reached for my phone to call a private investigator. It was time to find out what my alleged daughter was really up to. 2 weeks of waiting had felt like 2 years. Every morning I'd wake up hoping Detective Rodriguez would call with simple answers. Maybe the paternity challenge was just Scarlett acting out. Maybe there was some misunderstanding that could be cleared up with a conversation. But as I sat in his cramped office in downtown White Plains, watching rain streak the windows. I knew from his expression that simple wasn't on the menu. Mr. Grady Rodriguez said, sliding a thick manila folder across his desk. I've got your answers. I'm not sure you're going to like them. The office smelled like stale coffee and old cigarettes, despite the no smoking sign on the wall. Rodriguez was a former NYPD detective who'd gone private after 25 years on the force. Cordelia sat beside me, her hand resting supportively on my shoulder. She'd insisted on coming, said I shouldn't face this alone. I opened the folder and felt my world shift again. Photographs spilled out Vivienne entering an expensive restaurant with a distinguished-looking man in his late 50s. Vivienne laughing in the passenger seat of a Mercedes I'd never seen. Vivienne kissing the same man outside a jewelry store in Manhattan. Your wife's been seeing Thaddeus Whitmore for 5 years. Rodriguez said, his voice matter-of-fact, but not unkind. He's been funding her lifestyle. The house in Westchester, the private school tuition, the car, it's all his money. 5 years. That meant the affair had started before our marriage fell apart, before Vivienne filed for divorce, claiming I was holding back Scarlett's potential. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected, even after 4 years of wondering what had gone wrong. There's more. Rodriguez continued pulling out financial documents. Whitmore's an investment banker, manages portfolios for wealthy retirees. Problem is, he's been helping himself to their money. The papers showed a pattern of unauthorized withdrawals, forged signatures, and transferred funds. Account after account belonging to elderly clients, systematically drained over the past 3 years. The man's a thief, Mr. Grady. He's stolen over $2 million from elderly clients. These are people's retirement funds, their life savings. Some of them don't even know yet. I stared at the evidence, my hands trembling slightly. This wasn't just about my failed marriage anymore. This was about a criminal who'd been using my ex-wife, manipulating my daughter, and stealing from vulnerable people. How does this connect to Scarlett's paternity challenge? I asked, though part of me was beginning to understand. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. Near as I can figure, Whitmore's been grooming your daughter for years, getting her used to his money, his lifestyle. The paternity challenge is probably his idea. Eliminate you, legally adopt her himself, make her part of his family image. Perfect cover for a man who needs to look respectable. The room felt like it was spinning. Scarlett wasn't just questioning my paternity out of shame or teenage rebellion. She was being manipulated by a criminal who saw her as a prop in his elaborate deception. Cordelia squeezed my shoulder. Palmer, you okay? I wasn't okay. I was the furthest thing from okay. The woman I'd loved for 15 years had been living a lie funded by stolen money. My daughter was being groomed by a predator who was using her to maintain his facade of respectability. And somewhere out there, elderly people were losing their life savings to fund this sick charade. What do I do? I asked, more to myself than to Rodriguez. That's up to you, he said. I can give you copies of everything. You could take it to the authorities and let them handle it. Or what? Or you could walk away. Pretend you never saw this. Let Scarlett have her new life with all its expensive perks. I looked at the photographs again, Vivienne smiling in ways I hadn't seen in years, clearly happy in a life built on theft and deception. Then I thought about the elderly victims, people who'd worked their whole lives, only to have their savings stolen by a man who bought my ex-wife jewelry with their money. If I expose him, Scarlett gets destroyed too, I said quietly. She'll find out her whole new life is built on stolen money. The scandal will follow her forever. Rodriguez nodded. Probably, but if you don't, more people get hurt. This guy's not going to stop. Thieves like him never do. The rain kept falling outside, matching the storm in my chest. 4 years ago, I'd chosen to be the gentleman to step aside quietly when Vivienne wanted her divorce. I'd chosen not to fight dirty, not to expose her affair, not to make things harder for Scarlett. Look where being a gentleman had gotten me. I closed the folder and stood up, my decision crystallizing like ice in my veins. How long before you can get me copies of everything? Give me 2 days, Rodriguez said. You sure about this? I thought about those elderly victims, about the life savings stolen to buy my daughter's affection, about the criminal who thought he could erase me from my own child's life. I've been sure about a lot of things that turned out to be wrong, I said. But I'm sure about this. Some things are more important than keeping the peace. 3 weeks of sleepless nights had led to this moment. I sat in my truck outside Thaddeus Whitmore's office building in White Plains. Rodriguez's evidence folder on the passenger seat, my hands steady on the steering wheel despite the storm raging in my chest. Today I was going to look the man who'd stolen my family in the eye and tell him I knew exactly what he was. The morning was crisp and clear, the kind of October day that made you grateful to be alive. I had no idea how prophetic that thought would turn out to be. I'd spent those 3 weeks wrestling with my conscience, but the faces of those elderly victims haunted my dreams. Mrs. Chen, 83, whose retirement account had been drained to buy Vivian's jewelry. Mr. Patterson, a widower whose life savings had funded Scarlett's private school tuition. These weren't numbers on a spreadsheet. They were real people whose golden years had been stolen to pay for my ex-wife's affair. The confrontation was supposed to happen in his office. I'd planned it carefully, walk-in present, the evidence give him a chance to make things right before I went to the authorities. Naive, maybe, but I still believed in doing things the right way. I never made it to his office. The rural road leading to the business district was empty at 11:30 a.m. Just me and the autumn trees, shedding their leaves like golden tears. I was rehearsing what I'd say when I saw the black Mercedes, in my rearview mirror, closing fast. Too fast for the winding road. The impact came without warning. The Mercedes slammed into my driver's side rear quarter panel, sending my truck spinning across the center line and into the massive oak tree that had probably been standing there since before I was born. The world exploded in a symphony of crushing metal and shattering glass. When the chaos stopped, I was hanging upside down, held in place by my seatbelt, blood dripping from somewhere on my forehead onto the truck's ceiling. My left leg felt wrong, very wrong. Through the spider-webbed windshield, I could see boots approaching. Expensive boots. "You should have minded your own business, Palmer." Thaddeus Whitmore's voice was calm, almost conversational, as he crouched down to peer through my shattered driver's side window. His silver hair was perfectly styled. His suit, immaculate, despite having just tried to kill me. "Help!" I managed to croak, tasting blood. "Oh, I don't think so," he said, checking his watch like he had somewhere important to be. "This is what happens when blue-collar nobodies try to play in leagues they don't understand." He pulled out his phone, but not to call 911. "Vivian." "Yes, it's me. We have a problem. Palmer had an accident. No, listen carefully, he's missing. Car went off the road somewhere remote, body never found. You understand missing. Presumed dead." Even through my haze of pain and shock, I could hear Vivian's voice on the other end, high-pitched with panic. Thaddeus's expression hardened. "Pull yourself together. This is what happens when people threaten our family." "Yes, our family. Scarlett is my daughter now, and Palmer was a complication that needed to be resolved." He ended the call and looked at me one last time. "Nothing personal, Palmer. Just business." I must have passed out after that, because the next thing I remember was waking up in Westchester Medical Center. 3 days later, the doctor said a jogger had found me and called 911. Broken ribs, shattered left leg, concussion, internal bleeding. I'd been in surgery twice. Vivian appeared in my hospital room that evening, her face pale and drawn. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 3 days. "Palmer?" she whispered, glancing nervously at the door. "I thought," he said, "you were dead." I finished for her. "Sorry to disappoint." She started crying, then great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted this. I never thought he'd... God, Palmer, what have I done?" Before I could answer, her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and went white as hospital sheets. "I have to go," she said, backing toward the door. "He can't know I was here. He can't know you're alive." "Vivian, wait." But she was already gone, leaving me alone with machines beeping and the terrible understanding that I was supposed to be dead. That everyone I loved thought I was dead. That a man who'd tried to murder me was now free to completely erase me from my daughter's life. The next morning, a different doctor came in, one I hadn't seen before. He was nervous, kept checking his phone. "Mr. Grady, there's been a situation. Your emergency contact information seems to have been changed. Your family has been notified that that you didn't survive your injuries." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "Someone called yesterday claiming to be your brother. Said the family wanted privacy, no visitors, no information released. By the time we realized there might be a mistake..." He trailed off, looking miserable. I understood. While I'd been unconscious fighting for my life, Thaddeus had been busy making sure I stayed dead in everyone else's minds. Even if I recovered, even if I walked out of this hospital, as far as the world was concerned, Palmer Grady had died in that car crash. I was a ghost in my own life. 4 months of physical therapy had given me back the use of my left leg, but it was the legal documents Cordelia brought to my rehabilitation facility that truly showed me how completely I'd been erased from existence. "Palmer, you need to see this," she said, settling into the visitor's chair beside my hospital bed. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the Westchester Rehabilitation Center where I'd been slowly piecing my body back together. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. I was beginning to wonder if lucky was the right word. She spread the papers across my bedside table like a dealer laying out a losing hand. Court documents, legal filings, official stamps, and signatures that told the story of my systematic destruction. "She's not Scarlett Grady anymore," Cordelia said quietly. "Legally, you never existed." The first document was a name change petition filed 3 weeks after my accident. Scarlett Elizabeth Grady had become Scarlett Elizabeth Whitmore. The reason listed was desire to honor deceased father figure who provided support and guidance during formative years. Deceased father figure. Not even deceased father, just figure. The second document hit harder. Adult adoption papers filed 6 weeks after the name change. Thaddeus Whitmore was now Scarlett's legal father. The biological father was listed as Palmer Grady, deceased. I stared at my own death certificate, properly filed and notarized, declaring that I had died from injuries sustained in a motor vehicle accident. "How is this possible?" I asked, my voice hoarse with disbelief. "Presumed death," Cordelia explained. "When someone goes missing and there's evidence of an accident, the state can issue a death certificate after a waiting period. Usually it takes longer, but Thaddeus has connections. Judges, clerks, people who owe him favors." I picked up the adoption decree with shaking hands. It was official signed by a family court judge I'd never heard of. Thaddeus Whitmore was now legally responsible for all of Scarlett's affairs. He had the right to make medical decisions for her, financial decisions, even decide who she could marry. "He didn't just steal my wife," I said, the full scope of it finally hitting me. "He stole my daughter, my name, my life. 26 years of being her father, and now it's like I never existed." Cordelia leaned forward, her expression fierce. "There's more. Look at the financial documents." She showed me bank records, insurance payouts, property transfers. My life insurance policy had paid out $250,000 to Vivian as my beneficiary. My business had been dissolved, the assets transferred to an account controlled by Thaddeus for Scarlett's benefit. Even my truck, what was left of it after the accident, had been sold for scrap, the money deposited into Scarlett's college fund. They'd liquidated my entire existence and used the proceeds to buy my daughter's loyalty. "The system failed you, Palmer," Cordelia said, "but that doesn't mean justice is impossible." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since she'd walked in. Cordelia had been my business partner for 8 years, my friend for longer than that. She'd been the one to hire the private investigator, the one to visit me every day in the hospital, the one to bring me these documents, when she could have just let me live in ignorance. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "It would be easier to just let me disappear, start over somewhere else, build a new life." She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the parking lot below. "Because I've seen what men like Thaddeus do to people like us. They think they can buy and sell human beings like commodities. Your daughter, those elderly clients he robbed, even Vivian, were all just assets to be managed, or liabilities to be eliminated." She turned back to me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never noticed before, a hardness, a determination that went deeper than friendship or business partnership. "Besides," she said with a slight smile, "you're not the only one who's tired of being underestimated." That night after Cordelia left, I lay in my hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, and thinking about the man I'd been versus the man I needed to become. For 26 years, I'd been Palmer Grady, devoted father, loyal husband, honest businessman. I'd played by the rules, trusted the system, believed that good people doing good work would be rewarded. That man was dead. Officially, legally, completely dead. But the man lying in this bed, the man who'd survived Thaddeus Whitmore's attempt to erase him, he was something different. He was someone who understood that sometimes the system doesn't work, that sometimes justice requires more than faith in institutions. I thought about Scarlett, probably sleeping peacefully in her new life, believing her father was dead, while the man who'd tried to murder him tucked her in at night. I thought about those elderly victims still being robbed to fund her lifestyle. I thought about Vivian trapped in a web of lies and threats, too scared to tell the truth. They all needed someone to fight for them, someone who couldn't be bought, threatened, or erased, someone who was already dead and therefore had nothing left to lose. I picked up the adoption papers one more time, studying Thaddeus's signature. He'd been very thorough, very careful, very confident that Palmer Grady was gone forever. He was about to learn that some men are harder to kill than others. 8 months after my death, I was running electrical cable through the ceiling of the grand ballroom at the Westchester Country Club, invisible to the world below. Dead men, it turns out, make excellent contractors. No one asks too many questions when you work cheap and do quality work. I'd been surviving on cash jobs under the name Pete Morrison, an identity Cordelia had helped me establish. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was literally working above the people who thought I was 6 feet under, installing the very lights that would illuminate their charity galas and society functions. The Children's Heart Foundation benefit was in full swing by 6 o'clock. From my position in the service crawlway above the ballroom, I could see everything through the maintenance grates. Women in designer gowns, men in $1,000 tuxedos, all gathered to write checks that would ease their consciences while they sipped champagne that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. That's when I heard her laugh. 26 years of being her father and I could pick Scarlett's laugh out of a crowd of thousands. It was the same giggle she'd had as a little girl, the one that used to fill our house on Sunday mornings, when I'd make her pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse. I crawled to the nearest grate and looked down my heart, hammering against my ribs. There she was, more beautiful than I'd ever seen her, wearing an emerald green dress that probably cost more than my truck. She was radiant, glowing with happiness, surrounded by a group of well-dressed young people who hung on her every word, and beside her stood a young man I'd never seen before, tall, clean-cut, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to worry about money. He was looking at Scarlett like she was the only person in the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," the young man said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden hush that had fallen over their section of the ballroom, "I have something important to ask." My daughter's hand flew to her mouth as he dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring box that probably cost more than I'd made in 6 months. "Scarlett Elizabeth Whitmore," he said, and hearing my daughter called by another man's name was like a knife between my ribs. "Will you marry me?" The ballroom erupted in applause as Scarlett said, "Yes," tears streaming down her face as she threw her arms around her fiancé. I watched from my hiding place in the ceiling 3 feet away from the most important moment in my daughter's life, and I might as well have been on Mars. "I wish my father could see this," Scarlett said, her voice breaking with emotion as people crowded around to congratulate them. "He'd be so proud." "The young man fits. I heard someone call him," pulled her close. "Your father sounds like he was an amazing man." "He was," Scarlett replied, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue someone handed her. "He taught me that I deserved the world, that I should never settle for less than I was worth. I know he's watching from heaven, and I know he'd love you, Fitz. You're everything he would have wanted for me." I had to bite my knuckle to keep from making a sound. She was talking about me, about the man who'd raised her, loved her, sacrificed for her, but she was talking about me like I was dead, because as far as she knew, I was. The crowd began to disperse, moving toward the bar and the dance floor, but I stayed frozen in place, watching my daughter show off her ring to anyone who would look. Every smile, every laugh, every moment of joy was built on the foundation of my supposed death. "She's 3 feet away, and I'm dead to her," I whispered to myself, the words barely audible, even to my own ears. That's when I saw him, Thaddeus Whitmore, impeccable in his tuxedo, moving through the crowd like he owned the place. Which, considering how much money he'd stolen, he probably could have. He approached Scarlett and Fitz with his arms open, the picture of a proud father. "My darling daughter," he said, embracing Scarlett warmly. "I couldn't be happier." "Daughter," he called her daughter. The man who'd tried to murder me was now playing the role of father of the bride at my daughter's engagement, accepting congratulations from people who thought he'd raised her, who thought he'd been there for every scraped knee and broken heart and proud moment. I watched him shake hands with Fitz, probably already planning how to use the boy's family connections for his next scheme. I watched him pose for photos with Scarlett, his arm around the daughter he'd stolen from me. I watched him play the part of the loving father while the real father crouched in the ceiling like a ghost, invisible and forgotten. Something broke inside me in that moment. Not my heart that had been broken for months. Something deeper. Something that had been holding me back, keeping me cautious, making me think I could solve this through proper channels and legal means. I crawled back through the service tunnel toward the electrical room, my hands shaking with rage and grief, and something else, something that felt like clarity. For 8 months I'd been thinking like Palmer Grady, the man who played by the rules and trusted the system. But Palmer Grady was dead. Officially, legally, completely dead. The man crawling through this ceiling, the man who'd just watched his daughter celebrate her engagement with the criminal who'd erased him, he was someone else entirely. Someone who had nothing left to lose. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while I was replacing a circuit breaker in a strip mall in Yonkers. I almost didn't answer unknown Connecticut number, probably a telemarketer, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Grady, this is Judge Quinlan Ashford. I believe my son is about to marry your daughter." I nearly dropped my phone. "I'm sorry, what?" "Problem is, The voice continued cultured and precise. "She told us you were dead." I sat down hard on my toolbox, my legs suddenly unsteady. "Who is this retired federal Judge Quinlan Ashford? My son Fitzgerald is engaged to Scarlett Whitmore, formerly Scarlett Grady, I believe. According to her, her father died in a car accident 2 years ago." Imagine my surprise when my routine background check for the prenuptial agreement turned up tax, records, business licenses, and a very much alive electrical contractor named Palmer Grady. 2 months had passed since I'd watched my daughter get engaged to a stranger while I hid in the ceiling like a ghost. 2 months of sleepless nights of rage and grief warring in my chest, of wondering how to fight back against a system that had declared me legally dead. Now apparently the system was calling me. "Mr. Grady, are you there?" "I'm here," I managed. "Your son, Fitz, he seems like a good kid." "He is, which is why I need to understand what's happening here. Can we meet this afternoon if possible?" My office in Greenwich. 3 hours later, I stood outside the most intimidating law office I'd ever seen. Ashford and Associates occupied an entire floor of a glass tower that probably cost more than my entire neighborhood. The lobby was all mahogany and leather oil paintings of distinguished men in judicial robes, the smell of old money and older power. I felt like I was wearing a sign that said, "Blue-collar intruder." Judge Quinlan Ashford was exactly what I had expected. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed with the kind of quiet authority that came from 30 years on the federal bench. What I hadn't expected was the warmth in his handshake, the genuine concern in his eyes. "Mr. Grady, thank you for coming. Please sit. Can I offer you coffee?" He poured from an expensive machine and handed me a cup that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. But there was no condescension in his manner, no sense that he was doing me a favor. "I've been thinking about this situation all morning," he said, settling behind his desk. "How does a father disappear from his daughter's life so completely that she can claim he's dead? And more importantly, why would she want to?" I told him everything. The divorce, the affair, the embezzlement, the attempted murder, the legal erasure. I showed him the documents Cordelia had gathered, the evidence Rodriguez had compiled. I watched his expression grow darker with each revelation. "Thaddeus Whitmore," he said when I finished. "I know of him. Investment banker, manages portfolios for wealthy retirees. I had no idea that he's a thief and a would-be murderer. That he's the man who's been grooming my son's fiancée for years." Judge Ashford leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "Character doesn't come from money, Mr. Grady. It comes from choices, and the choices this man has made. He tried to kill me to cover up his crimes. When that didn't work, he erased me legally and stole my daughter. Now he's using her to get close to your family." "Why?" the judge asked. "What does he gain from this marriage? Respectability, your family's reputation, and probably access to your connections, your friends, their money." I met his eyes. "Judge, I don't think your son is in danger, but your family is about to become part of a criminal's cover story." We sat in silence for a moment, two fathers from different worlds united by the same fear that the people we loved were being manipulated by a predator. "What do you propose we do about it?" he asked finally. "She needs to face consequences, but with dignity," I said. "That's what separates us from them. We don't destroy people for revenge. We seek justice." Judge Ashford smiled for the first time since I'd walked into his office. "You know, Mr. Grady, I've met millionaires with no moral backbone and janitors with more integrity than half the Supreme Court. You worked double shifts to pay for your daughter's opportunities. You stepped aside when you thought it was best for her, even when it hurt. That's not weakness. That's love." Something I hadn't felt in 2 years washed over me validation. For the first time since this nightmare began, someone with power and authority was telling me I mattered, that my love for my daughter had value, that I wasn't just a blue-collar embarrassment to be erased. "So what's our next step?" I asked. "The wedding is in 6 weeks," Judge Ashford said, pulling out a legal pad. "That gives us time to plan this carefully. We're going to give your daughter exactly what she's been performing a reunion with her father. The question is whether she'll have the courage to face the truth when it's standing right in front of her." As I left his office that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope, not just for revenge, but for justice. Not just for exposure, but for redemption. Palmer Grady might be legally dead, but he'd just found himself a very powerful ally in bringing himself back to life. The federal building in White Plains was the last place I expected to be on a Wednesday morning. But then again, nothing about the past year had been expected. Agent Sarah Morrison was younger than I'd imagined, mid-30s, sharp suit, the kind of focused intensity that came from years of chasing white-collar criminals through paper trails and shell companies. "Mr. Grady, we've been investigating Thaddeus Whitmore for 2 years," she said, sliding a thick file across the conference table. Your evidence is the missing piece we needed. Judge Ashford sat beside me, his presence lending weight to everything we'd discussed. He'd made the introduction and used his federal connections to get us this meeting. Now we were looking at an investigation that stretched far beyond what I'd imagined. 2 years, I asked, flipping through surveillance photos, financial records, victim statements. How many people has he hurt? 43 confirmed victims across 5 states. Agent Morrison replied. Elderly retirees, mostly. He targets people who trust him with their life savings, then systematically drains their accounts. We estimate total theft at over $8 million. $8 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. I'd known about the embezzlement, but I'd thought it was just a few clients, maybe $1 million at most. This was a criminal enterprise. The problem, she continued, is that Whitmore's careful. Shell companies' offshore accounts forge documents. We've been building a case, but we needed someone with inside knowledge, someone who could testify to his methods. That's when the conference room door opened and my world shifted again. Sorry I'm late, Cordelia said, walking in like she owned the place. Traffic was murder. I stared at her, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Cordelia, what are you doing here? She sat down across from me, her expression apologetic, but determined. Palmer, I need to tell you something I should have told you years ago. I've been protecting you since the accident. The FBI assigned me to keep you alive. The words didn't make sense at first. Cordelia, my business partner, my friend, the woman who'd helped me establish my fake identity after the hospital. She was FBI. I don't understand, I said. Agent Morrison leaned forward. We've been watching Whitmore for years, but we couldn't get close enough. When he tried to kill you, we realized you might be our best chance at bringing him down. Cordelia volunteered for protective detail. Protective detail. Every job you've taken, every place you've lived, every move you've made, I've been watching, Cordelia said, making sure Whitmore didn't try again, making sure you stayed safe until we could build our case. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw things I'd missed. The way she always knew which jobs to take, which neighborhoods were safe. The way she'd appeared in my life just when I needed help most. The way she'd pushed me to investigate the paternity challenge in the first place. You've been using me, I said, not sure if I was angry or grateful. We've been protecting you, Agent Morrison corrected, and now we need your help to finish this. The wedding is in 6 weeks. That's our opportunity. She spread out architectural drawings of the Riverside Country Club, surveillance photos, guest lists. Whitmore will be there surrounded by potential victims, wealthy families with retirement accounts he can target next. We're going to use the wedding as a sting operation. Judge Ashford spoke for the first time since the meeting began. What exactly are you proposing? Palmer makes his entrance exactly as planned. The shock, the revelation, the public exposure, all of that happens. But while everyone's focused on the family drama, our agents move in. We arrest Whitmore on federal charges, seize his records, freeze his accounts. And Scarlett, I asked, what happens to her? She's not complicit in the crimes, Agent Morrison said. As far as we can tell, she's another victim, but she'll have to face the truth about the man who's been playing father to her. I thought about my daughter, about the engagement I'd witnessed from the ceiling, about the happiness built on stolen money and lies. This isn't about revenge anymore, I said finally. It's about justice for everyone he's hurt. Agent Morrison smiled. That's exactly what we were hoping you'd say. The rest of the afternoon was spent in preparation. Wire protocols, timing, coordination, backup plans. I learned that federal agents would be posing as catering staff security guards, even wedding guests. The entire operation would be coordinated from a command post in the country club's service building. You'll wear a wire, Agent Morrison explained. Nothing fancy, just a backup recording in case Whitmore says something incriminating during the confrontation. What if he runs? I asked. He won't get far. We'll have agents at every exit, unmarked cars in the parking lot. This is his last wedding, Mr. Grady. As evening fell and the meeting wrapped up, I found myself standing in the federal building lobby with Cordelia. 8 years of friendship, of partnership, of trust, and I'd never known who she really was. Are you angry? She asked. I considered it. I should be. But honestly, I'm grateful. Without you, I'd probably be actually dead by now. She smiled, and for the first time since I'd learned the truth, she looked like the Cordelia I'd always known. You're tougher than you think, Palmer. Tough enough to face your daughter and tell her the truth. Tough enough to see justice done. 6 weeks. In 6 weeks, I would walk into my daughter's wedding, not as a ghost, but as a man backed by the full weight of the federal government. Thaddeus Whitmore had tried to erase me, but instead, he'd created his own worst nightmare, a man with nothing left to lose and everything to gain from seeing justice served. The dead man was about to come back to life, and he was bringing the FBI with him. The memorial corner hit me like a physical blow. There I was, larger than life, in a gold-framed photograph surrounded by white roses and elegant calligraphy that read, Palmer Grady, beloved father, 1969 to 2023, forever in our hearts. Guests were already pausing to admire the tribute, some dabbing their eyes, others whispering about what a tragedy it was. I stood there at 3:15 p.m., very much alive, watching strangers mourn a version of me that had never existed, while the man who'd tried to murder me prepared to walk my daughter down the aisle. The Riverside Country Club was everything I'd expected. White tent gleaming like something from a magazine, crystal chandeliers hanging from tent poles, enough flowers to stock a florist shop. 150 guests in designer clothes, all here to celebrate a love story built on lies. Agent Morrison's voice crackled through my earpiece. Overwatch is in position. All units ready. You're clear to proceed, Mr. Grady. FBI agents were everywhere disguised as catering staff security guards, even wedding guests. 2 years of investigation had led to this moment. Justice was finally within reach. The processional music began at 3:45 p.m. Pachelbel's Canon, the same piece that had played at Scarlett's high school graduation when she'd pointed at me during her valedictorian speech. The irony wasn't lost on me. I walked through the tent entrance just as the music swelled to its crescendo. The effect was immediate and electric. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. Every head turned toward me like I was a magnet pulling iron filings. The string quartet faltered notes, dying in confused silence. I kept walking down the center aisle, my work boots silent on the white carpet runner. Each step felt deliberate, purposeful. 26 years of being Scarlett's father had led to this moment. Scarlett stood at the altar in her designer gown mid-conversation with her maid of honor when she turned to see what was causing the commotion. The moment our eyes met, her face went through a series of expressions I'd never seen before: confusion, recognition, terror. She froze completely, her bouquet trembling in her hands. "Hello, sweetheart," I said quietly, just loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Miss me?" The silence in that tent was deafening. 150 people holding their collective breath, trying to process what they were seeing. That's when Judge Quinlan Ashford rose from his seat in the front row, commanding the tent, with the presence of a man who'd spent 30 years delivering verdicts. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade, "this wedding cannot proceed. The bride's father is very much alive." The tent erupted in shocked murmurs. I watched faces in the crowd shift from confusion to understanding, to horror, as the implications sank in. "This is Palmer Grady," Judge Ashford continued, gesturing toward me. "Scarlett's biological father. He has been alive for the past 2 years, during which time his daughter has been telling everyone, including my family, that he died in a car accident." Scarlett's face had gone white beneath her makeup. "Judge Ashford, please, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." His voice cut through her protest like steel. "Palmer Grady owns a successful electrical contracting business. He pays taxes, maintains licenses, and has been very much alive while his daughter collected sympathy for being an orphaned bride." Thaddeus Whitmore stepped forward from his position near the altar, his face a mask of controlled fury. "This is ridiculous. That man is clearly disturbed. Security should remove him immediately." That's when Agent Morrison stepped out from behind the catering station, her FBI credentials held high. "FBI Thaddeus Whitmore, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and attempted murder." Federal agents materialized from everywhere: the catering staff, the security team, even some of the wedding guests. The elegant ceremony transformed into a crime scene in seconds. "You have the right to remain silent," Agent Morrison continued as 2 agents moved to restrain Thaddeus. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Thaddeus's composure finally cracked. "This is insane. I'm a respected businessman. These are fabricated charges. $8 million stolen from elderly retirees across 5 states. Agent Morrison replied calmly. 2 years of investigation. Your financial records, your shell companies, your forged documents. We have everything." The guests were riveted watching this family drama unfold like a soap opera performed live. Phones were coming out now. This would be on social media within minutes. Fitz stood at the altar looking like someone had just told him gravity had been canceled. "Emma," he said, using her real name for the first time I'd heard. "What is happening?" Scarlett's eyes darted between me, Thaddeus being handcuffed, and her fiancé. Real tears were flowing now, not the calculated moisture she'd been producing for the cameras. "Fitz, I can explain," she said, her voice breaking. "It's complicated. After the divorce, I was hurt and angry, and I said some things that got out of hand. And then it became this whole story, and I didn't know how to take it back. You didn't know how to take it back? Fitz's voice was rising. Scarlett, you told me your father was dead. You cried in my arms about missing him. I comforted you through your grief for 2 years. Vivian appeared from somewhere behind the bridal party, her face pale beneath her professionally applied makeup. She looked like she was about to be sick. Palmer, she called as I turned to leave. Palmer, please wait. I stopped, but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking completely. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I was scared. And Thaddeus said a lot of things, I replied, finally facing her. But you made your choice as Vivian, just like Scarlett made hers. As the FBI led Thaddeus away in handcuffs, as the wedding guests fled in clusters, whispering urgently into their phones, as my daughter stood in the center of it, all still in her wedding dress, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 2 years. Not satisfaction, not revenge, but justice. Clean, honest justice served with dignity. The dead man had come back to life, and he'd brought the truth with him. The country club's private dining room felt like a courtroom as we gathered in the aftermath of the arrests. The elegant space meant for post-wedding celebrations had become a place for reckoning. Through the windows, I could see FBI agents still processing the scene guests, streaming toward the parking lot reporters already arriving. Scarlett sat across from me, still in her wedding dress. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. The designer gown that had cost more than most people's cars now looked like a costume from a play that had gone terribly wrong. Dad, she whispered the word, barely audible. They told me you were dead. For 2 years I'd imagined this moment, what I'd say when I finally faced my daughter, how I'd handle the confrontation. But seeing her broken like this, I felt more sadness than anger. I know what they told you, I said gently. The question is, what did you know was true? She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I was ashamed, she said finally. Your work, your background, it didn't fit with Brandon's family. And Mom said you'd understand, that you'd want me to have better opportunities. So you let me disappear. I thought it was temporary. The words burst out of her. I thought maybe after the wedding, after I was established in their world, I could bring you back somehow. Explain that there had been a mistake. Vivian stepped forward from where she'd been hovering near the door. Palmer, she needs to know the truth. All of it. I looked at my ex-wife, really looked at her for the first time in years. She'd aged since the divorce stress lines around her eyes that expensive makeup couldn't hide. I helped the FBI Palmer, she said, her voice steady despite the tears. I wore a wire for 3 months. Every conversation with Thaddeus, every meeting, every threat, I recorded it all. Scarlett stared at her mother in shock. You what? He was going to kill your father, Vivian said simply. The car accident wasn't an accident. When Palmer survived, Thaddeus made it clear there would be another accident if I didn't cooperate with the death story. The room fell silent except for the distant sound of cars leaving the parking lot. Fitz, who had been standing by the window, finally spoke. How long have you known he was alive? He asked Scarlett. My daughter's composure cracked completely. 6 months, she sobbed. I saw him at a grocery store in Mount Kisco. He was buying coffee, and for a second our eyes met. I knew it was him, but I pretended I didn't see him. I was so scared of what it would mean, scared of losing everything I'd built. You knew, Fitz said, his voice flat with disbelief. For 6 months you knew your father was alive, and you said nothing. I was going to tell you, Scarlett pleaded. After the wedding, after we were settled, I was going to figure out how to what? Bring him back from the dead. Fitz's voice was rising. Scarlett, I comforted you through your grief. I held you while you cried about missing your father. I helped to plan memorial tributes for a man you knew was alive. Judge Ashford, who had been quietly observing from the corner, stepped forward. Fitz, perhaps we should... No, Dad. Fitz's voice was firm. I need to understand who I was about to marry. He turned back to Scarlett, his expression pained but resolute. I want to marry Scarlett Grady, not Scarlett Whitmore. I want to marry the woman whose father taught her that hard work beats talent, not the woman who was ashamed of where she came from. I'm still that person, Scarlett said desperately. Are you? Fitz asked. Because the person I fell in love with wouldn't have let her father stay dead for 6 months to protect her social status. The silence stretched taut as wire. Everyone waited to see what Fitz would do next, what Scarlett would say, how this family would begin to heal from 2 years of lies. I looked at my daughter, my little girl who used to stand on my work boots, while we danced to old country songs in our living room, who had grown into a woman capable of erasing her own father from existence. "Love doesn't have conditions, sweetheart," I said quietly. "But trust has to be earned back." She nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I know. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to try. I want to earn it back." Vivienne moved closer, her own tears falling. "Palmer, I know I can never undo what I did, what we put you through. But I want you to know every day for 2 years I regretted it. Every day I wanted to tell the truth. Why didn't you? I asked. Because I was a coward, she said simply. Because I was afraid of losing Scarlett, afraid of Thaddeus, afraid of facing what I'd become. Fitz looked between Scarlett and me, his young face showing wisdom beyond his years. "Can you forgive her?" he asked me. "Because if you can find it in your heart to forgive, then maybe we can all find a way forward." I thought about the memorial corner, about watching my daughter's engagement from the ceiling, about 2 years of being dead to the people I love most. I thought about justice served and truth finally told. "Forgiveness isn't a feeling," I said finally. "It's a choice, and I choose to forgive. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to trust again slowly, carefully." Outside, the sun was setting over Westchester County, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. Inside this room, a family was taking its first tentative steps toward healing. 6 months later, I stood at the back of a small chapel in Bronxville, watching my daughter practice walking down the aisle for the second time. This ceremony would be different, intimate, honest, built on truth instead of lies. 25 guests instead of 150. Real flowers from the local florist instead of imported orchids. Love instead of performance. "Ready, Dad?" Scarlett asked, adjusting her simple but elegant dress. She'd insisted on calling me Dad again, earning it back one conversation at a time over the past 6 months. "I've been ready for this moment for 26 years, I replied, offering her my arm. The chapel was filled with people who mattered. Judge Ashford, Cordelia, a handful of close friends, and Vivian, who had spent the months since Thaddeus's arrest, rebuilding her relationship with both of us. Fitz waited at the altar, looking nervous but genuinely happy. "Who gives this woman to be married?" the minister asked when we reached the front. "Her father does," I said, my voice steady and proud, with love and forgiveness. I placed Scarlett's hand in Fitz's, and for the first time in 2 years, felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The reception was held at the newly opened Grady Foundation offices in downtown White Plains. What had started as my quest for justice had evolved into something larger, a mission to help other fathers who'd been erased from their children's lives. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, raising my glass during the toasts, "the Grady Foundation for Forgotten Fathers exists because character matters more than class, because family bonds transcend social status, and because every child deserves to know the parent who loves them." The foundation had been funded by the assets recovered from Thaddeus's criminal enterprise. $8 million stolen from elderly victims had been returned to them, but the legal fees and recovered funds had left enough to establish a permanent endowment. Justice and purpose intertwined. Judge Ashford had become the foundation's chairman, bringing his legal expertise and federal connections. Cordelia had left the FBI to become our director of operations, using her investigative skills to reunite families instead of building criminal cases. Our first success story, I continued gesturing toward a man in his 50s, standing with a young woman who looked remarkably like him, is Robert Chen. His daughter told her fiancé that her father died in military service overseas. The truth was, Robert worked 3 jobs as a school custodian to put her through medical school. She decided his sacrifice wasn't prestigious enough for her new social circle. The room was quiet, listening to a story that could have been mine. Last week, Dr. Lisa Chen walked into her father's workplace and apologized. Today, Robert will walk her down the aisle at her real wedding, the one where she's proud to introduce him as the man who raised her. The applause was warm and genuine. These were people who understood that dignity didn't come from bank accounts or job titles, but from the choices we make when tested. As evening fell and the celebration wound down, I found myself on the foundation's balcony looking out over the city where I'd spent my entire adult life. Scarlett joined me, still in her wedding dress, but with her shoes off, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in years. "You taught me something important today," she said. "What's that?" "That dignity isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn." She leaned against the railing beside me. "I spent so much time trying to inherit respectability through other people's money and status. I forgot that you'd already taught me how to earn it." "And how's that?" "By showing up, by doing the work, by loving people even when they don't deserve it." She smiled, and for a moment She looked like the 6-year-old who used to help me plant tomatoes in our backyard, by being the kind of person who keeps their word even when it costs them everything. The sun was setting over Westchester County, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. In the distance I could see the lights of the country club, where this whole journey had reached its climax 6 months ago, but that felt like a lifetime ago now. "What's next for you, Dad?" Scarlett asked. I thought about the foundation, about the dozens of fathers who'd already reached out for help, about the families that could be reunited with patience and persistence. I thought about Vivian, who was slowly rebuilding her life with honesty instead of deception. I thought about Judge Ashford, who'd become not just an ally, but a genuine friend across all class lines. "I'm going to keep doing what I've always done," I said. "Show up, do the work, love the people who matter, even when they don't deserve it." I looked at my daughter, my little girl, who'd grown into a woman capable of both terrible mistakes and genuine redemption. "Especially then," I said. The future stretched ahead of us, uncertain but hopeful. Palmer Grady had been declared dead, once erased from official records and family memories. But he'd come back to life stronger, wiser, and more purposeful than before. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to stay buried. The deepest betrayal stories often come from family, but Palmer's journey teaches us that love, without boundaries, becomes self-destruction. God reminds us to honor our parents, yet what happens when children choose shame over love? Through painful betrayal stories, we discover our greatest strength comes not from revenge, but from dignified justice. Like the grandpa stories our grandfathers shared about character and integrity, Palmer learned that walking away isn't giving up, it's choosing your worth. God places people in our lives to teach lessons, and sometimes the hardest lesson is knowing when love requires tough consequences. The Grady Foundation now helps forgotten fathers, proving that pain can become purpose when we surrender our hurt to God's plan. These aren't just grandpa stories from the past. They're modern reminders that character matters more than class. When betrayal stories unfold, they reveal who we really are. God sees our hearts when the world judges our backgrounds, and He honors those who choose dignity over destruction. Sometimes love means stepping back and letting people face their choices. The wisdom in grandpa stories echoes through generations. Dignity is never negotiable, love shouldn't require shame, and some bridges must be walked away from with honor. If this story moved, you share your thoughts below. Have you faced family betrayal? Share this with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in life's hardest moments. Let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community worldwide.